Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. This is Roger Stone on the Roger Stone Show. We're at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio. And for the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking news, politics, entertainment, food, style, and a lot more. So don't touch that dial. If you're not in the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I grew up, well, you can always hear us at WABCradio.com. And if I were you, I'd go to the App Store right now and download the 77 WABC Radio app. That way you won't miss any of the extraordinary talk or entertainment that we do here on the most influential and powerful AM radio station in the United States. We're actually live streaming in 173 countries worldwide. So the election interference Stormy Daniels hush money trial opens in Manhattan on Monday. This is, of course, a trial that the prosecutors at the Southern District of New York examined and elected not to bring, and that is in itself saying a lot. District Attorney Alvin Bragg has taken what, even if Trump was guilty of the things that he is accused of, would be a simple business records civil case, and he has bumped it up to a criminal case. A couple of very interesting developments here. Michael Avenatti, remember him? He was Stormy Daniels' lawyer for a while, and he was actually touted as a potential Democratic presidential candidate. That's until he got caught stealing money from Stormy and Nike and several other of his clients and went to prison. He phoned into Ari Melber's show, The Beat with Ari Melber, and he said that he was calling from prison, of course. He said that this case was stale, that he thinks bringing this case would be a mistake, and he actually criticized federal prosecutors for not bringing the January 6th case much earlier. Poor Ari Melber looked like he was going to cry. In the meantime, Donald Trump has released a letter written on November 3rd, 2018. Let me read it. It says, to whom it may concern, over the past few weeks, I have been asked countless times to comment on reports of an alleged sexual relationship I had with Donald Trump many years ago. The fact of the matter is that each party to this alleged affair denied its existence in 2006, 2011, 2016, 2017, and now again in 2018. I am not denying this affair because I was paid hush money, as has been reported in overseas-owned tabloids. I am denying this affair because it just never happened. I have no further comment on this matter. Please feel free to check me out on Instagram, and I'm not going to read her Instagram address. Signed, thank you, Stormy Daniels. I wonder how they intend to explain that. And then, of course, you have Chief Witness Michael Cohen, a convicted liar. Mr. Cohen has changed his story as well regarding this entire matter. I've had some personal experience with Mr. Cohen. He lied under oath before both Senate and House committees, claiming that in 2016 he overheard a phone conversation between me and candidate Trump in which I allegedly told Trump that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange had damaging information on Hillary and Clinton that they intended to dump in public before the election. First, Mr. Cohen said this happened in July of 2016. Then he changed his mind and said it happened in August of 2016. There is, of course, no phone record that proves any of this. And the Trump assistant, the secretary who Mr. Cohen said came into the room to say, Mr. Trump, Roger Stone is on line one. Well, she also denies any memory of this having happened. Those disclosures, by the way, were pretty much a matter of public record. Julian Assange had said in numerous interviews that he had material on Hillary that he would release. So I can tell you exactly when those phone calls happened. That would be never. Joining us on the show today to break this monstrosity of a case down is legal beagle David Schoen. To my mind, probably the single smartest criminal defense lawyer in the country. We look forward to his analysis. I'm a huge fan of Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and yes, Al Jolson. They just don't make them like that anymore. Well, wait a minute, maybe they do. Crooner Sal Manzo joins us on the Roger Stone Show today, and if we're very nice, we might be able to talk him into singing for us a little a cappella. It's something I'm really looking forward to. Sal Manzo has quite a set of pipes, as you are going to learn. And we're going to talk to him about the state of live entertainment today and how there are no enduring stars like Sinatra or Elvis Presley or Bing Crosby, that you have disposable music, one-hit wonders. Most of our music today is synthetic. That's not a piano you hear. That's a computer. That's not a violin. That's a computer. That's not a saxophone. That's a computer. While the voices in the voice track have been so doctored, so improved, it makes you really appreciate the real thing. Sal Manzo, an incredible singer, joins us today on the Roger Stone Show. Former CIA Director John Brennan this past week has issued a warning claiming that Vladimir Putin has already promised, let me restate that, saying that President Donald Trump has already promised Vladimir Putin that he can just take all of Ukraine. According to an article in the Daily Express, former CIA Director Brennan says he is worried about a possible Trump presidency and the disaster it could spell for Europe. But who is John Brennan? That's what our focus is going to be on today. Mr. Brennan is a self-admitted communist. He says he voted for the Communist Party candidate for president. He also is the man who gave, as station chief for the CIA in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, gave visas to 4 of the 8 hijackers who attacked America on 9/11. If you look at Special Counsel John Durham's report, you will find that he is one of the architects of the Russian collusion hoax, the single greatest abuse of power and political dirty trick in American history, in which the full authority and the extraordinary capabilities of our intelligence agencies were utilized with the use of what they knew was completely fabricated evidence, the so-called Steele dossier. That's the secret report which falsely claimed that Donald Trump had cavorted with prostitutes in Moscow when visiting there as a private citizen. It was also John Brennan who was involved in the 51 intelligence agents, former and current, who co-signed a letter saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, which, of course, the New York Post has proven was entirely false. So what Mr. Brennan is engaging in is called the wrap-up smear. This is a standard technique of the Democrat media cabal. In fact, we caught Nancy Pelosi telling us exactly how it works. Take a listen.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You demonize, and then we call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic, and it's self-evident.
There you have it, folks. Tells you exactly how they do it. In other words, you take a falsehood, you peddle it to some reporter, I don't know, someone like Mike Isikoff at yahoo.com. He's the guy who wrote all about the Steele dossier without ever doing any due diligence to determine whether it was real. Then federal prosecutors pointed to Isikoff's story in court and said, you see, Your Honor, here's proof that it's real. It was reported at Yahoo. That's the technique. But John Brennan has a much, much darker secret other than the transgressions we've already talked about. And joining us today on the Roger Stone Show is John Guandolo. John Guandolo is a U.S. Navy Academy graduate, but more importantly, he worked at the FBI Department of Defense, where he conducted strategic analysis on the communist and jihadi movements inside the United States and beyond. He is also an expert on counterterrorism. He knows quite a bit about Mr. Brennan, and he joins us later in the show. Looking forward to that. I also dug deep into my mother's recipe box, and I found one of my all-time favorites. In fact, it was my dad's favorite. So before the end of today's show, I'm going to give you my mother's recipe for pork chops and spaghetti. This is a quick meal, something you can make in less than half an hour. You're going to love it. So before the end of the show, I will reveal that recipe for you. Margot Katzimatidis is really on me to produce my 77 WABC cookbook with all my family recipes. And in my spare time, which is almost none, I'm working on that, and we will have it for you before the summer. So stay tuned for that pork chop recipe. One thing is very clear about the Democrat fake news media cabal. You see, it doesn't matter how debunked, how discredited, how disproven any of their false narratives are, they will simply continue to recycle the same disinformation as if it has never been publicly refuted. That's what John Brennan is doing, in essence. The entire Russian collusion hoax, that is, the insistence that the Russians interfered in the 2016 election to assist Donald Trump, is a perfect example of this technique. I've actually rebutted every attack on me by the Democrats and their allies in the media, but it is really their practice to just ignore the facts and go back to recycling the same old defamation. Donald Trump survived an illegitimate investigation into his campaign based entirely, as I said earlier, on fabricated evidence of Russian collusion. He also survived two completely bogus impeachment attempts, all fostered by his refusal to plunge America deeply into endless foreign war that had been so profitable for the deep state war machine. The willful targeting of Donald Trump and his campaign, in which the full authority of the government was used to mount an illegal coup, is now known thanks to special counsel John Durham. They used what they knew was completely fabricated evidence to justify FISA warrants to spy on officials in Trump's campaign, as well as surveilling Trump himself. Now, just this past week, there is a fight in Congress about renewing the FISA law. You see, the FISA law allows prosecutors to get surveillance on virtually anyone without having to go to a regular judge where it is a public proceeding. The FISA law was originally set up to protect the United States from foreign intelligence, foreign assets, but it has been weaponized for political uses against the American people. President Donald Trump came out against the FISA warrant renewal late last week, and a hearty band of Republicans have essentially stalled action on that renewal. FBI Director Christopher Wray says that, well, if we don't return these sweeping powers to spy on any person he wants to him, well, then America is going to be subject to attack from our foreign enemies. Those are the smear tactics, the scare tactics that are being used to justify this draconian law. In 2019, I was falsely charged by special counsel Robert Mueller with lying under oath in my voluntary testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. And while I concede that I did make mistakes, none of these were either material nor did they conceal any underlying crime. In fact, government prosecutors never provided any actual evidence that I had either colluded with Russian collusion or collaborated with WikiLeaks in their release of documents from the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign, which U.S. intelligence agency falsely claimed were obtained through an online hack of the Democratic National Committee's servers. In fact, the FBI actually admitted in discovery during my trial that they'd never even inspected the computer servers of the DNC and had relied entirely on a third party, a left-leaning IT company called CrowdStrike, whose report alleged that the Democratic National Committee had been the target of an online hack by the Russians. Unfortunately, the judge in my case would not allow me to bring expert witnesses or the forensic evidence in which I could have easily proved that there never was any online hack by the Russians or anyone else of the Democratic National Committee. That's when they gagged me. We talked about the gag last week. It's unconstitutional. Nowhere does it say that if you are accused and indicted for a crime, that you lose your First Amendment rights, that you lose your rights to defend yourself. But that's exactly what's happened to Donald Trump in this Manhattan case. And late last week, he had an appeal granted over that very issue. If you're just tuning in, this is The Roger Stone Show. We're at 77 WABC. Don't go away. We will be right back. Late last week, I saw General Michael Flynn's biographical picture. It's entitled Flynn. It's extraordinarily powerful. I recommend this to you folks. He was with us here on the Roger Stone Show last weekend to talk about it. But wow, it tells you not only what happened to him, the extraordinary abuse of power, but it also explains exactly why he was targeted, why his career and family came to the brink of destruction. You can see it at flynnmovie.com. I really, really recommend it. Until you have been in the crosshairs of a vindictive and politically motivated federal government with unlimited resources, unlimited legal authority, and manpower, well, you really haven't lived. After everything I went through, late in the night of Election Day, November 3rd, 2020, just hours before the legal deadline imposed by a federal judge, the U.S. Department of Justice complied with a federal court decision ordering it to release all the last remaining redacted sections of the so-called Mueller report that had been hidden since the report's publication almost 18 months early. This report completely exonerates me. And now, because there are some incorrect public reports that I may be rejoining President Trump's campaign, which, by the way, I am not. I fully support him. I will volunteer to do anything he asks, but I'm not leaving the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. But because of these media reports, all of these allegations against me and the fact that I am a, quote, convicted felon, close quote, are being recycled. But the truth is, at midnight on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020, the busiest news day of the year, and time to get as little press coverage as possible, the U.S. Department of Justice released those last remaining redacted sections of Mr. Mueller's report, in which they couldn't sugarcoat the fact that despite 2 years of intense investigation, spending millions to pore through every aspect of my life, conducting a legal proctological exam, dragging 36 witnesses to the grand jury after obtaining all of my electronic communications for 4 years, literally millions of emails and pages of documents, tax returns, banking, and financial records, they could actually find no evidence of collaboration or coordination between me and WikiLeaks regarding the release of emails regarding John Podesta, the Democratic National Committee, or Hillary Clinton, or that I had any advance knowledge of the timing, content, or source of those disclosures. Even BuzzFeed, the left-wing media operation thankfully no longer in existence, who had brought the lawsuit to make this information public, reported that I was vindicated. But the rest of the media, well, they reported nothing at all. It's amazing. I'm reminded of Labor Secretary Ray Donovan. He was from New Jersey. He served in Ronald Reagan's cabinet. There was a witch hunt in which Ray Donovan was falsely accused of corruption. And after a long, expensive investigation, he was cleared, but his name was ruined. Where, he said, do I go to get my good name back? Where indeed? Given the hundreds of pages that were printed to prop up the convoluted defamatory narrative now known to be nothing more than a brazen fabrication by the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton's failed political campaign. The U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee report, which is constantly pointed to as the proof of Russian collusion, is in fact just a pasted together collection of news clips from the fake news media. There's no proof of anything there. You know, I could tell you that the actual report says this office's determination that it could not charge WikiLeaks or Stone as part of a 1030 conspiracy that was also informed by constitutional issues such as prosecution would present. Under the Supreme Court's decision of Bartnicki versus Vopper, the First Amendment protects a party's publication of illegally intercepted communications on a matter of public concern, even when the publishing parties knew or had to reason to know that of the intercept's unlawful origin. Of course, they could never prove that I had any illegal receipt of any such material. The office also determined that it could not pursue Stone under a conspiracy charge for some of the same legal reason. Here it is, folks. The most fundamental hurdle, though, are factual ones. As explained elsewhere in the report, claims by right-wing gadfly Jerry Corsi and his accounts of interactions with Stone around October 2016. That's around the time of the famous grab them by the you-know-what interview with presidential candidate Donald Trump, could never be corroborated. There you have it, folks. I basically lost my home, my savings, my insurance, most of it anyway, the little college fund that I had put aside for my grandchildren's college education. I had to sell my car, was gagged unconstitutionally so that I could not even defend myself. But where, as Ray Donovan said, do I go to get my good name back? The other outrage, of course, is this claim that I had an exchange of direct messages with an entity on Twitter called Guccifer 2.0. According to the government, Guccifer 2.0 is a Russian intelligence asset and a hacker. First of all, they have produced no evidence whatsoever of that. But I myself released that 28-word exchange. It is benign. It produces no evidence of collaboration or coordination, and obviously I received nothing from them pertaining to information at the Democratic National Committee or Hillary Clinton's campaign. But the most amazing thing is that this exchange took place 3 weeks after WikiLeaks had already published all of their material that so badly embarrassed Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. So the claim that I had served as a link between Assange and WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign is a fugazi. I was called a traitor and a Russian spy. I could defend myself and rebut any of that. The left insisted that my rather colorful Twitter tweet, some of my speeches, proved that I had advanced knowledge of the source and content of the WikiLeaks disclosures. They also insisted that I knew in advance about the publication of John Podesta's emails. Again, the government produced no evidence of that. And when I was exonerated in Robert Mueller's final report, well, that didn't seem to make the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or the Huffington Post, or the Atlantic, or the Hill, or Politico, or Salon, or Vox, or Vice, or MSNBC, or NBC, or the Business Insider. Now, there's all of those who were quick to smear me as a traitor to my country. Not a single one of them reported on the stunning conclusions by Mueller's thugs, in which I was entirely and completely exonerated. It's important to note that this same tactic is now being used on Donald J. Trump. And the media lynch mob is recycling the same Russia, Russia, Russia nonsense again. Anyway, folks, we have a great show for you today, so buckle your belts. Don't touch that dial. Remember, you can always hear us at WABCRadio.com, no matter where you are in the state or in the nation or in the world. As the late, great Jackie Gleason would say, away we go.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. As I said earlier, the so-called hush money trial of Donald Trump opens in Manhattan tomorrow. And joining me now to analyze that particular legal matter, plus the other lawsuits and prosecutions in the tsunami of lawfare against President Donald Trump, is David Schoen. David Schoen is one of the foremost criminal defense attorneys in the United States. He ably served President Donald Trump in one of his 2 impeachment trials. I just flat out say it. He's the single smartest lawyer I have ever met. And being in American politics for 45 years, I've met a lot of lawyers, but David Schoen is that rare lawyer who not understands the law, not understands how to conduct himself in a courtroom, not only understands the importance of legal strategy, but understands that those things that happen outside the courtroom, in the court of public opinion, also matter. David Schoen joins us on the Roger Stone Show now. David Schoen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great honor always.
So, David, you people see you on Fox. You have the courage to go in the lion's den on CNN. You're always. I learned something anytime I see or listen to you. You had a great show last Thursday with Laura Loomer on Rumble. Watched that with interest. The case that District Attorney Alvin Bragg has brought against Donald Trump, the so-called hush money case. There's some recent developments in that case. As you know, federal prosecutors looked at the evidence and they declined to bring this case. What is your assessment of that case today?
Case never should have been brought, wouldn't be brought against anybody other than someone with the name Trump. The office itself, the district attorney's office itself, we know from the book written by Mark Pomerantz, special counsel brought in to investigate this thing. We know that Bragg and the other and higher ups in the office, people like before Bragg's time, Cy Vance, the district attorney at the time, thought this case never should be brought. As you just mentioned, the federal authorities probably the strongest office in the country, Southern District of New York, looked into it extensively, heard from witnesses, sent it to a grand jury, decided there was no crime, bring no charges. Federal Election Commission, no crime, no charges, no civil action should be brought based on this, in contrast to a situation when Hillary Clinton paid money to influence the election. But anyway, I think there are a number of infirmities. I think the indictment is absolutely defective as a matter of law in the case. I think this judge is sitting on this case as a matter of law, and it's gone well beyond now just a matter of judgment. And there are other issues in the case that I think really undermine the state's case. It never should have been brought, but it's brought for political reasons. Alvin Bragg promised to do it when he was running for office, outrageous promise for a government official to make, a potential government official to make, to go after a private citizen who's not under investigation or anything like that, just to pander to the voters. So, I can break down any of these things you like, but that's my evaluation of it.
Now, Judge Juan Merchant, first of all, he gave a campaign contribution to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. Now, it was only $15, but I don't think it matters whether it was $15, $500, or $5,000. The judicial canon of ethics says that judges are not supposed to give political contributions. And then we learned, based on the dogged reporting of Laura Loomer, the independent investigative journalist, but also now encompassed in President Trump's lawyers' motions for the recusal of the judge, that the judge's daughter is an adult, and she is a Democratic political operative and fundraiser who has raised as much as $93 million using this trial as the talking point, as the selling point in her fundraising. Is that not an egregious conflict of interest? And more importantly, should Trump be convicted in a Soviet-style show trial, would that not be grounds potentially to overturn that conviction?
It's absolutely mandatory that this judge recuse himself, disqualify himself from this case. Now that we know what we know. Listen, the lawyers filed a recusal motion earlier in the case. I thought it was weak. Not only was it weak, there were typographical errors in it. The first page said he should disqualify himself from the case because of the appearance of impartiality. It's exactly the opposite. You want him to be impartial. But putting that aside, a lot of facts have been developed in the case. Laura Loomer, did a lot of research and developed some of them. But anyway, the New York Post did an article showing, as you say, $93 million raised by a company that now made the judge's daughter its president, apparently. And what we know now is that she has fundraised off of this. The company has been paid consulting fees by, you name it, who's list of I Hate Trump, Schiff, and others, millions and millions of dollars. And what the statute provides under New York law, 22 NYCRR, New York Code of Rules and Regulations, at section 100.3 E1D number 3, is that in a case in which a judge has a relative to the 6th degree, that's pretty far out there. This is his daughter, so certainly covered, has an interest that could be affected by the proceedings before the court shall recuse itself. Not a question of just the appearance of impropriety. It's the court shall. And it makes sense. The American public is entitled to believe in the integrity of the system, and the defendant is entitled to have a fair and unbiased judge, not influenced by, or even potentially influenced by, these kinds of factors. So the judge is making a huge mistake. It should be reversed. In federal court, we would take him up immediately on mandamus, or you risk waiving it. But hopefully his lawyers now know something about what they're doing. This judge never should hear this case. And the question also is, why, as a matter of propriety, would the judge hear the case? There are dozens of justices of the Supreme Court, that's the trial court level, in New York County, who could hear this case. This judge wasn't randomly selected. He was handpicked by the chief administrative judge, who picked him for the Bannon prosecution, the Trump Organization prosecution, Weisselberg case originally. It's not coincidental here. And there's a history in this district attorney's office of the district attorney handpicking judges. They claim they don't do it anymore. I don't know. It had to have been challenged. And I think that's another major factor. All of these things, by the way, must be considered cumulatively. The contribution, the campaign contribution, the judge's daughter's factor, and every other factor that's relevant to this.
Look, I'm not an attorney, that's for sure, but I'm still trying to figure out what the underlying crime here. Even if Donald Trump did do the things he's accused of, which he vehemently denies, and which there's a lot of evidence to bolster that claim, late last week, when challenged by Trump's lawyers, prosecutor Bragg presented 4 different theories of the case. I'm not a lawyer, but I thought you needed at least one solid theory of the case. Speak to that, if you would.
That's a huge issue in my view. In my view, that's why this case is dead on arrival. I think it's a matter of due process, a matter of Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights of the United States Constitution, and even under the New York Constitution. The indictment is absolutely defective. No defendant should or could be expected to defend against a charge made out this way. And I'll break it down. The original charge is the underlying charge is a misdemeanor, falsifying business records. New York law under Section 175.10 allows you to transmute that into a felony if you can show that the defendant falsified the business records with the intent to commit another crime. But an only way to defend that case is to know what that other crime is alleged to be, and the defendant is entitled to have the grand jury specify what that other crime was intended, what the intended target crime was. Otherwise, the defendant's left to wonder, how do I defend? Let's say falsified business records, for what purpose? Well, was it for election fraud? Was it to cover up the Stormy Daniels thing? Was it for tax issues? And so on. And so, as you say, the prosecution listed maybe 4 avenues, and the judge literally in his order denying the motion to dismiss said, well, basically, what do you want? They laid out 4 possibilities for you. That absolutely makes the point. That makes the case that the indictment is defective. It's not only a matter of due process and effective assistance of counsel, compulsory process, right to confrontation, all of those fair trial rights, but it's also to bar against double jeopardy. Let's say he gets acquitted now, found not guilty, and they come back and say, what we really meant was the target crime was X, because the judge has said they don't have to specify it. I think the judge is dead wrong. This is a fundamental violation.
It's daunting, folks. By the way, for supporters of President Donald Trump, there is a rally on Monday. Yes, it's called the Hey, Hey, Hey. It's Fat Alvin Trump rally. That will be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at 130 Leonard Street at Collect Pond Park in Manhattan. If you want to demonstrate against Donald Trump, you absolutely have the right to do that too, folks. But please, whether you're for Trump or whether you're against it, keep it peaceful, keep it civil, keep it respectful. That's how America is supposed to work. We're here with David Schoen, a criminal defense lawyer who very ably represented Donald Trump in one of the 2 outrageous impeachments against him. David, let's turn, if we may, to the so-called documents case. This is a case in Florida. Very strange. The evidence against Trump in this case was elicited before a D.C. grand jury, and then special counsel Jack Smith took those transcripts and had them read to a Florida grand jury in order to secure his indictments. Isn't that a little, unusual?
Most unusual. Never heard of it before. And he clearly has a method to his madness. By the way, I just want to mention, if we have time before we finish, there's another evidentiary issue I'd like to talk about in the New York case.
Let's go.
What I'd like to mention about this case is, because I think the public is really attuned to this, centers around Michael Cohen, President Trump's former lawyer and so on, who himself has been convicted of crimes and went to prison and so on. So I mentioned before, as you did, that the federal authorities reviewed this case and decided not to prosecute. Well, they reviewed it very thoroughly. And in fact, they called in witnesses. They had evidence presented to the grand jury. One of the key witnesses is a fellow by the name of Robert Costello. Bob Costello is a former deputy chief in that U.S. Attorney's Office, well-respected, longtime New York lawyer. And Bob Costello represented Michael Cohen at the time. When Michael Cohen went in and began cooperating with the authorities in the Southern District, he waived his attorney-client privilege with Bob Costello for some reason. So Bob Costello was then called in by the feds to talk about what he knew about the case. And what he told the feds had to have been primary factor in their decision not to prosecute. In fact, he reports they chuckled when he told them what the real facts were. What Bob Costello says is that he told Michael Cohen had said he didn't want to spend a day in jail. And so he told his client, Cohen, I have to act in your best interests. If you really don't want to spend a day in jail, if you have something on Donald Trump, now is the time to help yourself. If you can tell truthfully to the prosecutors that Donald Trump was involved in this Stormy Daniels payment and so on, now is the time to do it. And he said, Michael Cohen told him, I just can't do it, Bob. It's not true. I cannot do that. And Bob Costello told that to the feds. He tried to tell it to the grand jury. He had 300-plus emails back and forth with Cohen, and the prosecutor only allowed him to put on 6 before the grand jury, he reports. And so he told the grand jury the story. The question is now whether Bob Costello will be called as a witness to contradict Michael Cohen. This would be very damning prior inconsistent statements. Well-recognized avenue for cross-examination, goes directly to the credibility of the witness. And at the time, in this case, Michael Cohen made the statements to Bob Costello, he had every reason on earth to try to inculpate, to try to make Donald Trump look like he's guilty if those were the facts. But he said exactly the opposite then, and so Bob Costello should be allowed to testify. The problem here is, are the lawyers prepared for that? Now, I've recently seen a decision by the judge in which the prosecution moved to exclude a lot of evidence from this case, including evidence that the Federal Election Commission reviewed this and decided not to bring any charges, and that the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York reviewed it and refused to bring any charges. The judge has already ruled that those things won't be allowed in. But the lawyers told Bob Costello that he won't be allowed to testify either in the case. That makes absolutely no sense. And the question I have is this. When there's a motion to exclude evidence and a defendant wants that evidence to come in, the defendant must make a detailed proffer of evidence. That is, tell the court, if you were to permit this testimony, here's what it would be, and lay it out in detail. How on earth could the defense lawyers in this case have made a detailed proffer when they never interviewed Bob Costello? When they did interview Bob Costello finally, it was clear that they didn't really know the facts. So I'm worried about that. I'm very worried about that. And to me, if that hasn't been done, I know that preparation work hasn't been done. If the proffer hasn't been made properly, I believe there's a true claim here for ineffective assistance of counsel. So President Trump needs to be represented at the highest level in the strongest terms possible. The country demands it. The integrity of the system demands it. Bob Costello is ready, willing, and able to be a major witness in the case. We'll see what happens when Michael Cohen testifies, but he certainly knows that's out there, and the feds certainly know it's out there, and they certainly have notes reflecting Bob Costello's statements to them. So that's an issue to keep your eye on. Will Bob Costello testify in this case to contradict Michael Cohen?
All right, folks, you heard it right here at 77 WABC. We're making news. That was newsworthy. There is a very respected former Justice Department official, Robert Costello, who later worked as a defense lawyer. He's extremely respected at the bar. He could easily debunk many of the claims of Michael Cohen based on what Attorney Schoen has just told him, but it's unclear whether he's being asked to testify. It's unclear whether the judge is going to allow him to testify. It's unclear whether Trump's lawyers have made a proffer to the judge to explain why his testimony is relevant and important to the case. First time I've heard this, but you heard it here first on the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. Okay, David, let's go back for a moment to the so-called documents case. The special counsel, Jack Smith, went out of his mind when the judge in that case, Eileen Cannon, asked both the prosecution and the defense for potential jury instructions. Not that she's decided on jury instructions, but in one of her proposed orders, she references the Presidential Records Act, which, of course, President Trump and his lawyers contend would make him immune for prosecution in this case. And Special Counsel Smith essentially appeared to me to legally threaten the judge in his filings. I'm an amateur at this, but I've never seen anything quite like that. Your reaction?
He was way out of line. He's taken this position because he's quite afraid, obviously, of the Presidential Records Act being a factor in the case. And so he's taken the position that it has absolutely no relevance to this case. Well, he's just wrong about that. There's a case from your old friend, Judge Amy Berman Jackson in D.C., that says quite clearly that under the Presidential Records Act, there's only one person named who can designate the status of records, whether they're presidential or personal records, at that person's discretion. And that person is the President of the United States. Therefore, it would be directly relevant if Donald Trump, as President of the United States, designated records that he was holding as personal records. Someone might disagree with it. But what she said is the president is the only person with the discretion to do it. This is directly relevant to the mens rea, or the mindset of President Trump with respect to these records. And that is a mindset that the government has to prove. They have to prove that he knew he was doing something wrong when he kept these records. And that's not the case. He was given advice, direct advice from lawyers. Some lawyers said one thing, some lawyers said another. He's entitled to believe the lawyers who he thinks make the most sense and rely on their advice. And they told him that he was entitled to have these records. And he believed that. So that would be a complete defense to the charges in this case. I would say this, it's in direct contrast to the life experience of President Biden. As you know, President Biden was caught with National Defense Information records and classified documents, apparently, which he held not as president ever. This was as vice president or senator. And if anybody should know that's illegal, if it's illegal, it would be Joe Biden. He spent his entire life in government. Donald Trump was a businessman who just came to the government. I think Jack Smith is panicked about the Presidential Records Act, and the judge took a lot of criticism for what she did. But, take a step back. This judge is kind of the American experience. Daughter of immigrants, worked her way through top schools, clerkship, was a prosecutor, and so on. She's no dummy. She gets maligned in the press because she seems to be the only one making straight, up the middle decisions in the case. I thought that her idea of having them present jury instructions was very clever. Many lawyers start to prepare their case with jury instructions to get a sense of the law, the parameters of the law around which they have to build their case. I happen to start with a cross-examination approach, but some lawyers do it with jury instructions. And she said, well, these are going to be big issues in the case. Let's see how you think it plays out and how these issues should be presented to a jury.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show. We're here with criminal defense lawyer David Schoen, and we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
We're back, folks. This is The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC. Take a quick minute to go to the App Store and download that 77 WABC radio app so you don't miss any of the extraordinary talk or entertainment on the most powerful, dynamic AM radio station in America, 77 WABC. We're here with criminal defense lawyer David Schoen, who very ably represented President Donald Trump in one of the two impeachment trials before the U.S. Senate. And we're talking about various aspects of the legal tsunami of lawsuits and prosecutions against Donald Trump. We're talking about the case playing out in Florida, the so-called documents case. there were, as I recall, there were several motions to dismiss this case by Trump's lawyers, one of them being based on the Presidential Records Act, citing the fact that Judge Amy Berman Jackson ruled that Bill Clinton could do anything he wanted with his documents, including keeping them in a sock drawer at his home as a precedent. But they also argued that this case should be dismissed on the basis of selective prosecution. There is no question, if you will read Special Counsel Robert Hur's report, that he bluntly says that then Vice President Joe Biden willfully retained classified and top secret documents in violation of the law. So how is it that Donald Trump, who may have been actually entitled to keep those documents under the Presidential Records Act, is being prosecuted, but Joe Biden, who the special counsel says definitely broke the law, he's not being prosecuted? Does the fact that the judge has asked for these jury instructions means that she has elected not to dismiss the case on any basis?
No, I don't think so at all. And furthermore, I think what she has decided with respect to the Presidential Records Act is that this is a real live issue in the case. She may not dismiss it. She may not find immunity based on it, but she believes that it's a real live issue that should be presented as to his state of mind and to the jury. And with respect to the selective prosecution, you could hear from the oral argument that she was very offended by that. This is an issue that plays well beyond this case. I think it's a very important political issue because the public now knows that the special prosecutor, Mr. Hur, Joe Biden, broke the law, period, end of story. He didn't prosecute because he said, as you know, and whatever the terms are, I'm paraphrasing, that Joe Biden would be presented as a feeble man with a poor memory to a jury and therefore would be sympathetic, and they didn't think they could get a conviction. Let the American people judge whether that's an appropriate reason not to prosecute and whether that's a broader statement about President Biden and his ability to stand as the president of the United States now and in a future election. It's a very important issue politically also. But I think on a gut level, the selective prosecution idea really hits people wrong. Why? There's no real justification. The prosecution, Smith has said at some point, well, but President Trump didn't give back the records. Number one, he thought he was entitled to keep them. And number two, the charge isn't just about not giving back the documents. It's about holding national defense information that a person wasn't entitled to hold. Joe Biden, according to the special prosecutor, absolutely did that and absolutely would have and should have and did know better. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I don't think she's going to dismiss the case on selective prosecution because the standard is very, very high. And we look at protected classes, that sort of thing. The law is just not great on it. There's a great deal of prosecutorial discretion that the law permits. But in this case, I think it hits everybody as extraordinarily unfair. Just one more unfair factor is about all of these cases.
Let me make one more comment before we have to go. I find it interesting that Andrew Weissman and Neil Keitel and others attack Judge Cannon because she was appointed by Donald Trump. But they seem to ignore the fact that every judge who sat on a Mueller investigation case was appointed by Barack Obama, and the Russian collusion hoax, under which most of them essentially, including myself, were prosecuted, was hatched in the office of, well, yes, Barack Obama. That's in Special Counsel John Durham's report. But it didn't seem to bother them that we were going to trial before judges appointed by Barack Obama, who is the main perp in the Russian collusion hoax, egged on by James Comey and, of course, CIA Director John Brennan. We'll have more to talk about him later in the program. Let me thank my guest, David Schoen, for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. David Schoen, anytime I listen to you, I learn something I didn't know. I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to join us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you very much. You do a great show.